not just in the UK, but I think globally, people have really grabbed onto, let's get as much work on these little pallets as we can and leave that spindle running. I think automation is the future. I think anybody that is looking to invest in machinery or isn't at the moment should be looking at automation, because I think to stay ahead of the game and to stay ahead of competitors, we're selling automation to very small companies now, that 10 years ago you wouldn't have even spoken to.
Dominic, hello and welcome to the MTD podcast. Thanks for accommodating us here at Matsuura. What a setting.
You're welcome, mate. It's been a while, and you've done well to get me back, on a mic and in front of a camera.
Well, when we first talked about this podcast, you didn't think the cameras were going to be on, but
no,
I was surprised
you told me a little white lie, didn't you?
It is great to be here, great to see you again, and we're probably, I don't know, we were just talking, it's probably maybe 4 months since I've seen you, so we're well into 2023 now. What I'd like to cover in this podcast, Dom, is a little bit about the Matsuura journey in the last few years, because I've visited personally here a lot of times. We've seen a lot of your customers, new and existing, and there's some trends that we'll talk about that I think are interesting to the manufacturing audience. But it's been a really good few years, hasn't it? Tell us about this sort of journey from 2020 through till now and where Matsuura's at.
Yeah, I mean, I think, we were all scared with COVID, weren't we? But for us, throughout 2020, we remained busy. I think what we saw in market appetite was the hunger for automation at all levels, really. And I think, if I look at, the customers, the orders, should I say, that we've taken over the last 2.5 years, the amount of new business that we didn't know them, they obviously got to find who we were. And I think, I will give you, a pat on the back. I think the reach that you give the market with on your platform has reached out to a lot of companies that were probably looking to make that step from the single table VMC, single table 5-axis machine to automation. And I think the market has sort of played into our portfolio. We're very fortunate, as you well know, our range very well, from the 330 right through, or the MX series right through to the MAM. So, the amount of new business. But the biggest thing that we've seen that's probably been a trend changer is the amount of horizontal machines being purchased again in the UK market. We've seen where we saw that a decline in requirement in the UK and everything was 5-axis multi-pallet. We've now started to see the need and the sales for multi-pallet horizontals.
That horizontal point has been one that we've spoken about a lot at MTD for years, and in fact in my machine tool sales day I only sold, and you've sold a lot more machines than I did or have, but I only sold one horizontal machining centre.
Oh wow.
One horizontal out of, I don't know, I must have sold a couple of hundred machines in my time, and I could never quite understand why there was no, maybe I was a bad salesman, but there was no kind of call or popularity of that product when there should be, shouldn't there? So maybe that's a good point to start, or good place to start.
It's a good one. The horizontal machining centre is harder to sell than a vertical. Because, and remember that video we did years ago, what's the difference? And I said, tip it over, right? It's still laughing now. But it is that. And when you actually explain to people that, say, on one pallet you've got 4 faces, that's actually like 4 verticals in one machine. And then you say, well, on this machine I've got 15 pallets. You've now got, all those faces, all those pallets. So, and I think what we are seeing and what we're doing as well as a business is that people come to us for a multi-pallet 5-axis. But we actually challenge them that is that the right technical solution for their application? Because it's very easy to say, I want a 5-axis because I can do everything. But is it the right solution that gives you the best productive solution from an engineering standpoint, but also a return on investment? We're very focused on the ROI. So what we've managed to do is a lot of customers that have come to us for a 5-axis multi-pallet, we've actually changed them to a horizontal. Be in the right, and it's a lot less money. It can be anything from £100,000 to £150,000 less for that application. Well, when you think on an ROI, that's a lot of money back in their pocket.
Yeah, we actually asked the question on social media a few weeks ago about companies why they were continually buying a quantity of vertical machining centres instead of maybe one horizontal machining centre. And we were trying to get feedback from the audience, and actually there was some really good positive points. But there was also a couple that said, well, they're a lot more expensive than a vertical machining centre, which was I think quite a narrow way of looking at it, because it's not about call it the ticket price, is it? It's about how long that machine's going to run for, the productivity and the efficiency.
Well, I think the thing that's also changed though, Paul, is that a twin pallet horizontal is difficult to sell. So let's be clear, I very rarely stock a twin pallet unless it's a large horizontal machining centre. So everything we're stocking horizontal wise has got 6 pallets, 12 pallets, 15 pallets. Okay? Because again, the added value is the unmanned run. So if you can convince somebody that a horizontal technically is the right solution for the application, i.e. it's just a prismatic part, it's not 5-axis simultaneous. So if you can do it in 2 setups on a 5-axis machine and you can do it 2 setups on a horizontal machine, why buy a 5-axis? The argument does become, well, I want something more flexible for the future. Well, in that instance, buy a 5-axis multi-pallet. But if someone says to us, well, we've got a contract now for 5 years, 10 years or 5 years plus rolling, you say, well, why do you want to buy a row of 5-axis machines when if you're going to run them for 5 or 10 years, you can actually get more productivity out of a horizontal because you've got a larger face, you can put more parts on, the chip-to-chip time per part comes. You know, it's all the technical arguments. But the fact that we stock 6 pallet, 12 pallet, 15 pallet horizontals in stock, means that we can give that solution quite quickly.
The horizontal machining centre, what is the smallest company you've put one of those into? Because you've got people watching and listening to this that might have a vision of horizontals, and there's a big row of them.
It's our shared friend, Matt Jeunesse.
Oh, okay.
He is probably the smallest engineering business.
And probably to put that vision across on camera and on this podcast here, his machine probably occupies maybe a third of his machine shop, or maybe a quarter.
Yeah, I would say so, yeah. And he employs, well, he's your mate as much as mine, but he employs a handful of people. You know, and that machine runs night and day. So I think, you know, you don't have to be a large company to buy a multi-pallet horizontal. It's all about the flexibility, the repeat. I mean, if you've got batches that repeat on a weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, bi-monthly call-off, that's why we sell, you know, a multi-pallet machine. But if you don't need it to be 5-axis, a horizontal will do. But I think generally the other thing that's probably influencing it, one thing I've missed out, there is more volume coming back to the UK. We have seen onshoring over the last 2 to 3 years of more volume components coming back that are generally simpler to manufacture. So you put them on a horizontal.
Are you definitely seeing that?
Yes.
It's interesting to hear, because I have been in a few machine shops where I've heard that, but from a supplier's perspective, selling machinery into the market, there is now a demand and work coming back from overseas for higher volume components.
100%. 100%.
Really?
Yeah, we're seeing it. And I think that's what's influencing the horizontal growth, because people are getting volume. Because people always say, if I buy a 5-axis multi-pallet, I've got total flexibility. I can do volume, I can do variety, I can make a one. Horizontals take longer to set up. The tooling's more complex, more expense. So if people are getting longevity of orders, that makes their decision-making process easier. So we don't go into, you know, you need to buy a horizontal because of. What we say is, what's your contract? What's the life of this product? How many parts in the family? You know, and what's your frequency of delivery? We do that as part of our sales evaluation process, I suppose, Paul. And then you go, well, actually, yeah, the 5-axis will do a job, but have you ever considered the horizontal? So it switches from that standpoint, because we saw a more, I would say, a need growing in the UK. You know, Roger and I took the decision to stock more horizontals. You know, we've never stocked 12 pallet 405s before. We're selling them. You know, these carry a price tag of £500,000 plus. People are buying them. It's not as if, you know, they're sitting here. You know, we're buying them off plan. You know, before they even arrive, they're sold. So there is a need. There is a need, but you know, it needs to be.
And it
calculated.
sounds like a growing need, which is good to hear. I mean, we came into this podcast, and one of the things we are going to talk about now, which I thought we'd probably start talking about, was some of the new products you've got and the success in those areas. Yet we've spent 10 minutes talking about an existing product that you've had in your portfolio for decades,
Yeah.
which is still growing as well. So that's kind of where it all started, isn't it, for Matsuura in a lot of ways?
Well, it did. I mean, the journey of automation started with MAM72. Okay, so if we go back over 30 years ago, that machine was manufactured, the Generation 1 model, it was called a MAM72 S40. Okay, that machine was ahead of the market. Right, it was created by the brother of Masanori Matsuura, our old president, Katsu's father. You know, and it was MAM72 Matsuura Advanced Manufacturing, 72 hours unmanned running, Friday to Monday, unheard of 30 odd years ago. So, but that concept has remained, right? So, from that one machine, you know, we've spawned off the multi-pallet tower system on the horizontals. The whole MAM range has got multi-pallets, depending if it's a 35V, 42V, 52V, 63V, 70V, dare I go on. And then obviously we had the MX, which, you know, the MX 520 as a single table 5 axis was introduced, probably 15 years ago, you know, that was brought into the market to give a Matsuura offering on a single table 5 axis. They're all multi-pallet now. You know, the whole MX range has got its own multi-pallet suite and a number of tools.
And this is where I've witnessed personally the acceleration of your market share in those small to medium-sized companies that may go from a single table machine up to a pallet system. What's led them down this path, do you think, in the last few years to really, I mean, we see one behind us here, an MX330, which has been incredibly successful. What's led them in that direction?
Well, I think, you know, before we started the podcast, we've had a chat, you know, I mean, I've been here a little while, 30 odd years now. Plus.
You don't look like it.
Yeah, maybe not. Anyway, but I think if you look at, you know, the MAM72, you know, I always use the cliche of a car. Like, we all aspire to have a nice car. You know, could I afford a 911? Could I afford an Aston Martin? You know, not wanting to sound arrogant, the Matsuura brand has this per se, this image, this market sort of positioning. But the reality is that we're a small, family-run business by Mr. Matsuura, Katsutoshi Matsuura, that produces a good product. Okay, so the brand is bigger than the size of the company. I always put that out. You know, as a global manufacturer, Matsuura produces far fewer machines than people think, and I'm not going to mention it on the podcast because obviously that's something I'd like to keep to ourselves. But what it means is that people aspire potentially to own a Matsuura. It's quite humbling when a customer buys their first Matsuura and they sort of say to us, "Never thought I'd ever be able to afford one." Well, the thought and the true affordability are two different things. The fact that the investment returns, it's multi-pallet, it obviously runs unmanned. If you can produce parts day and night, unattended, reliably, you generate a big income. That income then is your affordability. So we always say to a customer, you know, if you could afford to spend X per month on an investment without winning another order today, can you afford X? And 9 times out of 10, Paul, the answer is yes, they do. So people don't realise they've actually got the affordability to buy one of these machines. The reality is they put it on the floor, and it creates more revenue than any other spindle they've got on their shop floor very quickly. And that's why it becomes 2 machines, 3 machines, 4 machines. So all of a sudden they go, well, I don't need any more people. I'll just put another spindle in.
It's important to stress at this point as well for those that, and I'm sure there aren't many that haven't heard of the Matsuura brand or the MX range. We're talking here about 5-axis machines with 10 pallets or 4 pallets, depending on the model, aren't we?
Correct, yes.
To give you that unmanned run. Give us an example then, Dom. I'm putting you on the spot a bit here, of a company where you've sold one of these machines to which has surprised you because you thought it was going to be harder than it was. Let's look at a 10-pallet machine, an MX330.
Okay.
It's gone into a company where you can reflect on it and go, whoa, I didn't think I'd win that. And the reasons that you did win it and the reasons that they had it, that persuasiveness that you genuinely portray in some respects.
Yeah. There is one that comes to mind, and I will mention them. So Abbey Precision in Milton Keynes, they came on, they were very interested in the MX. I think they'd done a lot of research on MTD, as many customers do with our MX machine inquiries. And he surprised me because he came on and they were, what I would say, very precision. They do, a lot of aerospace, motorsport.
I think we visited, didn't we?
Yeah, you have. You've done a video on them. So, Steve was great because, they had a lot of verticals, VMCs, I think the odd single table 5-axis, but they wanted to go into automation. For years I knew of that business. For years I tried with previous owners, to be fair, when it was owned by other people. And yet he bought one and very quickly has ordered 4. So, and that was from nowhere, and that's just one example. We've got many a customer, R&G, Enzo, old Matsuura user, and really wanted to change his business direction, the work holding, the flexibility to change from one job to another and always keep the spindle running. Now R&G, another one, he's bought 2 MX330s. He is talking, in the future about buying maybe more MXs or hopefully a MAM 72. There's just 2 examples. I think, one that it's actually not my customer, but it's our customer, Cinch. We've just delivered another 2 MX330s. They've now got 3 in spate of 2-3 years, and this is common.
And what is the common thread in all of these? Is it replacing fixed, several vertical machining centres? Is it replacing, what is the demand and what's the sweet spot that's making that a success for you?
I think people are not necessarily replacing the machines to start with, but what they realise is that when they put one in, how quickly it eats the work and how easy it is to get the machine running unattended, that they go... Regardless
of volumes on it?
Yeah, and because it becomes a very quick batchy machine as well. So what happens is, here's another one, high spec. Darren, bought one, and he was putting out on LinkedIn and everything. It won't be long before I buy another one, and I knocked on the door and he's bought another one. So we're delivering that very soon.
Where's he going to put that?
Well, we're actually taking some old machines out. So again, he's seen the benefit of the return of that investment, and within less than 12 months, he's bought a second machine and taking 2 tiring machines out. One is a 5-axis single table, and one's a vertical. But he knows that one machine will do the work of 3 or 4 machines. So although he's replacing 2 with 1, he's actually going to get more capacity. And the way I always say, if you're tight on foot space, your footprint will work much better for you as a return.
And then you've got the MX850 now, which you've added the pallet stations in. And again, once again, to set the scene, the 850 is a much bigger 5-axis machine, isn't it?
So it's an 850 diameter by 450 high.
So are we now saying that the need for the automation is extended across industry, isn't it? Even to these much larger and heavier components.
It is. The MX850 was slow on the uptake. So the 850 is a single table we've done quite well with, and we've got lots of customers that bought those. But the 850 PC4 all of a sudden gave opportunity to much larger workpieces. There's one customer in particular, again I'll mention them, Swiftle, just a little bit north of where we are.
I've been there.
Yeah. So Stuart came in here about 3 years ago during COVID, and he said, Dom, I need to change the way I manufacture and put work through my workshop. I'm currently using a lot of single table 5-axis machines. I'm not going to mention the brand, but that's where they work. It wasn't Matsuura. So we started talking, and he stood in front of all the machines in the showroom where we are now, and he said the 850 fits his work portfolio. Do a lot of oil and gas, exotic machining of components. Quite robust. Now, the 850 gives you 15,000 RPM, but it also gives you a very high torque spindle motor. So for machining those exotic materials, it was obviously quite well. So we put the first one in, very quickly followed by a second. Last year, we've put a third, and I'm not going to tempt fate, but we are talking about more right now as we speak. So again, there's another one from 0 to 3 now, maybe 4 or 5.
And is this without the pallet?
With pallet changer.
This is with pallet changer.
It's the pallet changer that's made the difference, because he went from single table 5-axis machines of the same size, another manufacturer but the same size machine, but what they were experiencing was obviously long changeover times. The other model had a small tool magazine, so obviously we offer more tools, pallets. We've also done a little bit with some tool ID, so changing tools quickly. So the changeover time from one job to the next is very quick. It doesn't necessarily, he leaves the machine running unmanned, but for Stuart, it was more about the changeover of from one component type to another component type to get the utilisation up on the machine.
And do these companies lean on you much post-installation? Do you find that there's quite a journey from machine 1 to machine 2 in learning how to get the best output out of them? Or does that come naturally to these companies?
All in machine 1. So we help, if people need help. I mean, to be fair, we always say now, I haven't got to teach you to program, right? CNC's been around for so long. But what we do is we just steer how to best utilise the unmanned bit. So from a point of view of work holding, how many parts they can put on, or look at different work holding solutions so that they can get the unmanned run. We always say the thing with the MX range is it's not like the MAM. So let's be clear, the MX is 4 pallets or 10 pallets. The MAM 72, we can do 32 pallets, 40 pallets, 49 pallets, 24 pallets, 15 pallets, 18. So we get a lot more pallets. So your work holding doesn't need to be as complex. But when you put, like the MX behind us, is 10 pallets, 90 tools, your work holding needs to be a little bit more out of the box, right? And that's what I've been seeing on my journeys. In fact, I'll mention them. I went to Maximum Precision on Friday, bought an MX330. Wow, what a job they've done with their work holding. They've put these complicated cubes on this little machine.
To get more parts.
To get so many parts up, and when you look at, the guy said it takes a long time to get it to set and run compared to maybe just putting one job in a vise, on a 5-axis vise. But the cycle time, they're getting off these machines, they're running 20 hours unmanned because I think what people have done with the MX330 PC10 in particular, not just in the UK, but I think globally, people have really grabbed onto, let's get as much work on these little pallets as we can and leave that spindle running. And honestly, some of the stuff I'm seeing out on the road, it's brilliant.
So if you took a pie, as we call it, and you were to divide it up into the percentages of the areas that you believe have been the reason for your successes in the last 3 years, the growth of the business.
Small OEMs.
Right.
Small OEMs, 100%.
Would that represent that whole pie, do you think, or?
Majority, because if you look at the last 3 years, aerospace, very little business. We don't do a lot in the UK with medical or direct. Oil and gas, a little bit, but not a lot. Motorsport, big contributor to our business, but again, it's been quiet for the last few years. Now, if I look at the small OEM that does all sorts of industries, right? They might be in aerospace and motorsport and medical, but they're subcontractors. So rather than it being an OEM, as Mr. Matsuura would say, job shop. We sell to the job shop, subcontractor, right? The subcontract market for us definitely is what's kept us alive throughout COVID, 100%, and it's what's been our growth in the last 2, 100%.
Moving away from blue, Muratech machines. So not only horizontal 5-axis machining, milling as your, the lion's share of your machine tools, you're now heavily into turning as well. Why was this added to the portfolio?
To be fair, we took Muratech on many years ago, Paul, and again, Japanese, the tie with Matsuura and Muratech in Japan. And to be honest, we had it in the bag. You know what I'm saying. When you're a salesman, it's in the bag. But we never really sell a lot of product. We've got a few product lines, but Matsuura has always been the mainstay. What we've decided to do and what we've been doing for the last few years with Muratech is stock more and invest in people. So we look at the Muratech business now like we do like a MAM 72 or an MX customer. So we're now trying to educate people to automate, leave the machines running. And the good thing about the Murata machine is his basics pedigree is that 24 hours, 7-day, hard thumping machines in automotive. That's where they made their name in the world industry. But when you bring that machine to this market, you've got to educate who Muratech is. And that's took us a while. But what we're seeing now is that we put these machines in, we educate the customers how to use them. We've got the addition of Dave Lowe, who's come into the business in this last 12, 13 months. who's transformed the way we think about how we sell our turning technologies as well. So last year we grew the business on Muratech. This year it's already bigger than it was last year. We're stocking more, and we're punching out the same, or sending out the same message, really. You know, think about automating something that's turned.
I mean, looking at the machine behind you, the MWR 120, I've actually looked and reviewed that. It's so quick, isn't it? Part, in chuck, out of chuck, turns, milled, Y-axis.
Correct, yeah. On a twin spindle front facing.
On a twin spindle front facing machine. It looks like a lot of machine, but it's probably not that hard to get to grips with, because you kind of split it down the middle. And
I think the thing is, people see the gantry and they see and they go, oh, it's a bit like, it's the same concept, a horizontal multi-pallet. Oh, but once you get through the basics and say, well, it's still a lathe, but all we're doing is combining more and letting you do more while you're not there. So again, it's the same concept, is that the appetite for automation is only going to grow, okay? As a supplier of machine tools in the market, we have to educate certain people on the benefits of and the return on investment. You know, again, they're not cheap. You know, everything comes with a big ticket price. But if you've got the right work, the right mix, and you can make the changeover very, very simple from one to the next, the machines don't run. The machines don't stop from running. So you know, we expect customers to be achieving, you know, anywhere between 80 and 95% OEE on any of our products.
Dominic, you've some changes here in the business recently as well, which I'm sure hopefully you can publicly talk about. You've always been, you know, a great face for Matsuura, but now in a more senior role.
Well, thank you. Yes, so in January of this year, I was promoted to Sales Director and a board member of Matsuura UK. So yeah.
Really good. Congratulations to you. Now, my last question to you is, that machine's blue, your jacket's blue. Are you going to paint the Muratech's blue?
No,
as well?
Muratech's are staying white, mate. No, 100%. But yeah, cut me in half. It's a little bit of blue blood.
And the next year ahead, you can't see much change other than this automation, you know, continuation of you know, machine sales in these areas.
I think automation is the future. I think anybody that is looking to invest in machinery or isn't at the moment should be looking at automation, because I think to stay ahead of the game and to stay ahead of competitors, you know, we're selling automation to very small companies now, you know, that 10 years ago you wouldn't have even spoken to, and they're buying, and they're not just buying one, they're buying multiples of machines.
And that's probably a message, people listening to this, that maybe if they are a small business and thinking it isn't for them, it's unaffordable, it's not the right product, they haven't got enough space, I'm sure you can answer those questions.
I always say, you know, and I've said it for years on, you know, when we've done all the videos over time, a Matsuura is more affordable than you think, but obviously you need the right ingredients. Talk to us, let's see if the recipe is right, and we'll do business.
Brilliant. Dom, thank you very much for the podcast.
Pleasure,
always great to see you.
Pleasure. Lovely to see you.
See you next time.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye.
Thanks for listening to the MTD podcast. If you found value in this episode, please subscribe and leave a rating and review. Find more episodes on mtdcnc.com.